Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Improving Student Outcomes with Academic Video Content, which is sponsored by Sage Publishing. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All of the attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like. In addition, we also are using the chat feature today, so please direct all your comments through there and your questions into the Q&A. Also note that there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom right corner of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. And with that, we are ready to get started. So I will hand it over to Michael, our moderator for today.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and welcome everyone. Yes, I would like to welcome you all to this Sage Publishing sponsored Choice webinar entitled Improving Student Outcomes with Academic Video Content. My name is Michael Carmichael. I'm the Senior Director, Editorial Library at Sage Publishing based in Toronto in Canada, as I was saying earlier. We all are based here. My key responsibilities are to manage our Sage Video and Sage Research Methods products lines. I'm also delighted to welcome our guest speakers and attendees at today's webinar today as well. So they are Professor Steve Jordans from the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. Professor Jordans is a passionate educator, researcher, innovator, and entrepreneur, all within the general area of online learning and educational technology. Steve has won numerous awards for his teaching and in helping students achieve their skills potential in their learning too. He is also the co-creator of Peer Scholar, an education technology itself designed and researched specifically to provide a formal approach for the development and measurement of transferable skills. We also welcome Sapo, or Sapo, who is an undergraduate student at the same University of Toronto Scarborough campus studying neuroscience and psychology. And Sapo was a recent student in Steve Jordan's Introduction to Psychology class. In this webinar, Sapo will be providing us with a first-hand student perspective on video content and its associated learning outcomes. And then we also have David Kwasny, who is the Digital Products and Technologies Librarian, also from the University of Toronto Scarborough, the Library Digital Scholarship Unit. David focuses much of his research on OERs, digital tools, and media and their use in pedagogy and research. He recently published an OER pressbook, open source for digital communication and learning objects, and developed a training course, the Digital Learning Producers Training Program, to teach students to assist faculty with the creation of digital media content. His pressbook and training program are very available in the eCampus Ontario Open Library. And for those who can engage with this poll, please do. We're going to be having some polls throughout this session, so please do answer that first poll that's coming up. Our plan for the webinar is for Professor Jordans to start us off, talking through some fascinating research conducted out of the University of Toronto around academic video and students' capabilities to understand scientific research through video. Throughout, Steve will interact with Sapo to bring the student voice out for our attendees, for you all. Then David Kwasny will bring the librarian's perspective to all this with some questions posed back and forth to you all as our attendees before we invite questions back from you all at the end in our Q&A. So with that, I will gladly hand over to Steve to get us underway. Thanks, Steve.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. And there's the results of that first poll there for everyone that's interested. So we're on the accepting, borderline enthusiastic. Cool, cool. Well, hey, let me just say first of all, fantastic to be with you all today. I really appreciate the opportunity. And as Michael said, the kind of plan is we want to generally talk about video and the power video can have in the academic setting. We're going to start with a very specific research study where we've used video in a very specific way to go after a very specific goal. But we also want to bring this back out. You know, this is one specific instance, but we also want the discussion to hopefully be more generally about video and how it might be used in education context. And of course, David is going to help be the translator for this. I am not a librarian myself. I am a professor of psychology, and I don't totally understand your context as well as David certainly does. And so his challenging task is to take what I said and bring it back and put it in your speak and get some engagement and discussion going at the end. And that's ultimately where this is all leading to. We want to hear as much from you, as we want to talk to you. So we look forward to that Q&A, and I'm going to kind of jump into the presentation now so that we can have some time left over. I will start very quickly by introducing again Sapo, who's here. So yes, Sapo is one of our students. He's a extremely high performing student, but he's going to partly, he wasn't in the class that I'm going to talk about, not the specific instance of that class, but he was in the class the year before, and he experienced the very similar kind of process. And so he'll be able to talk to us every now and then about what students feel as they go through this. Excuse me, I don't usually have a... That's interesting. I seldom... Sapo, you want to introduce yourself for a sec?
Yep, no problem. Thank you so much for introducing me. I'm Sapo. I'm actually an international student who was in Professor Jordan's class, psychology, and I'm really excited to, I guess, like represent the voice of the students and all my peers. And I believe, an introduction to psychology, I believe there's 1,000+ students, and it's such a diverse group of student bodies from a lot of countries. And I've made a lot of great friends there. So I do know, that process of learning and being in such a research institution. So I'm very happy and honored to bring such student perspective in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Sapo. And excuse me, everybody. That was really grabbed me, that one. Okay, we're going to start with a bit of a poll ourselves here because the context I'm going to talk to you about is one around scientific literacy, which is, something we've always cared about. But maybe, well, that's sort of the question. Given all that has been happening in the world and all that has happened recently, which of the following options do you feel is more accurate around scientific literacy? So that's first one is supposed to say is now scientific literacy is not that important. No, that's right. Okay. So please entertain those options and go ahead and vote. And, I just want to, again, throw this to Sapo and say, when we start talking to students about scientific literacy, I don't know if you remember the first time when a professor started talking to you about that. What were you thinking kind of going into that? And like did you totally buy in, or was it sort of a new concept to you? Where were you in your mind at that time?
Yep. So I kind of knew it's very important, but it's like a cliche word, like we need to be scientific, we need to have scientific literacy. But it's somewhere in the back of our mind, because little do we know um, as students, like actually think how important scientific literacy is in our fields and our daily lives. And one of the reasons is I think it's a challenging process. And because there's such a learning curve to become to be equipped with scientific literacy, it's not easy. And the positive benefits of scientific literacy, it's often not too obvious at the moment. So I believe it's critical and it's a transferable skill for everybody. But sometimes that emphasis or that motivation to actually get that skills, I guess, can be improved. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's almost one of these things that you have to learn before you understand the significance of what you learned. To some extent, it just sounds. People like us will say it's important, but until you really understand it, maybe you don't understand the degree of importance. So now, I mean, we have some nice polling results here, and we're seeing, you know, sort of what we expected to see. But even a strong endorsement of that it's now critical to prevent the world from going in a very, very bad direction. You know, that's kind of how it feels. That's how it feels to me now. It used to always been important, and we always used to want our students to have a good grasp of scientific literacy. Yeah, exactly. The transferable skill, Megan, bang on. But you know, it feels like it's even ratcheted up now. It used to be something that would help us make more intelligent decisions. Now it seems to be something we need to prevent us from making really bad decisions, you know, almost on a species-wide basis. So it is critical. I believe it's very, very important. And a lot of people take introductory psychology because they're trying to avoid the sciences. And so they come to intro psych thinking, okay, they don't need, you know, it's not like biology or chemistry. And then they run into chapter 2, which is the scientific method. And because I know that many of these students, my class and the experience they have in my class may be the only direct experience they have with scientific literacy, it becomes really important to me to make sure I try to do that really well. And so that's going to be the sort of context for what we're going to talk about here. Here's Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, saying scientific literacy is a vaccine against the charlatans of the world that would exploit your ignorance. You know, that's how it can feel to a lot of the scientific minded people now. And so how do we get people to take this vaccine? So this analogy is going to go too far, so I'll just leave that analogy right away. I'm going to just jump in and tell you what we did, because again, we want to leave time for David, and let's just give you the sort of meaty part of the talk as a way to get us all thinking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Joseph makes a good point there that, you know, we could be talking about information literacy more generally. I generally am talking about scientific literacy. I'm ultimately in my class trying to explain to students that humans have long been on the quest for truth, you know, trying to find ways of arriving at knowledge. And the scientific method, and especially the experimental method, is the pinnacle of that. It is the best approach for really trying to understand what we call causal relationships in the world, what causes what. And so I agree, information literacy in general is important. But in my context, it really is scientific literacy that I'm after. Now, how do we do this? You see a bunch of details here, but let me just step back and give you the bigger picture. Students, of course, go through a chapter about the scientific method. I lecture on the scientific method. And right around that time, which is right around this time in the term, by the way, this is happening in my class now, I ask them to go interact directly with a scientific article. Now, I do it within Peer Scholar, which is a complex process, and we don't need to get into the details of that. But their main, if we just think of their main first task, what they're tasked with is to go read that primary source article, summarize it, and by that we say, you know, tell us what the theory was, what the hypothesis was, what were the independent variables, the dependent variables, what was the result, etc. And we also ask them to do what we would call the next step. If you were the scientist, where would you take this research next? So a little bit of creative thinking added there. That is the challenge that students face, and we have known for a long time. In fact, let me say clearly right now, the primary investigator of this research is somebody named Adam Frost, a postdoc working with me. Adam was a TA for these students, and he saw how challenging they found this activity. And just so that we all appreciate that, that's in a large part because people who write scientific papers, they're part of a community, and that community starts to just sort of make assumptions about each other. So we use jargon that we all understand because we've all been around it so long. We vaguely refer to theories that we all understand because we've been working with them for a long time. But when a student now is dropped into one of these articles and they have that jargon that they don't understand, and the theory is just kind of alluded to but never stated directly, they can find it a real challenge to kind of get in there and understand what it's about. Librarians are bad for that too. There's something called, you know, the curse of knowledge. And once you know something, you talk about it in certain ways, and it can become impenetrable for people who don't have that knowledge. And so that was the context we were working in. And here was Adam's idea. Adam felt that if he could get scientists, the scientists especially who wrote the paper, to create a short video where they kind of describe why they did the research. So part of it is supposed to sort of be the motivation of the scientists themselves, but also to describe the research in more lay terms, more easily penetrable terms. And the idea was that video would potentially serve as a bridge for students, that if we made these videos available, maybe if they watched the video, they could then penetrate the paper better. Okay. And that was the core goal. So in this first experiment, we have, so by the way, as Sapo alluded to, my class is 1,800 students strong. So we have a good, strong data set always. And what we did is a random control design. So when students logged in, they clicked something to get the instructions for the activity. And for half of those students, they clicked into a place where these videos were available as well. The other half had no idea videos were available. They just got right into the papers. And if any of you guys have ethics issues, it's all cleared through the ethics board. Happy to chat about any of those in discussions. But that's how things went. And so now we have half of the students have access to these videos. There were 1,242 students who gave us consent to use their data. And we both looked at their performance on the activity itself, but we also brought them back 5 weeks later and asked them some questions about the papers. So we're looking at how the video might have affected long-term retention. Okay, so first, just a few quick things to notice. We asked them a number of questions as part of this research project, and one of them was, hey, if you were given a task like this, like to summarize a paper, etc., would you appreciate the availability of some supplementary resources that might help you with that? And the first punchline is, yes, absolutely. 62% said they would use any supplementary resources. 31 said maybe, maybe not, but they were certainly open to having those available. And when we provided the videos to those who had access to the videos, we see that 91% of them did actually watch the videos. In addition, they didn't just peek at the videos. When we asked them, how much did you watch? All of it were well over, 50%. Most of it is basically the rest. So we've got, other than a small percent, we've got most of the students watching most of the videos. And those that watched them, if we said, hey, were these helpful? Did you like them? 90% said they either helped a bit or they helped a lot. So how long were the videos? Thank you, Amy. There's a couple of videos at play here. One of them was a little shorter than the other. So let me be clear about that. And I'll actually just go to the next slide to show you. There were papers by someone named Alum and someone named Balana. The Alum paper, we used a video created by Sage or in association with Sage that Alum had created with Sage. It was a little bit longer. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was in the 10 to 12 minute range, maybe. And I think the Balana one was a little shorter. Michael, if you know for sure, feel free to throw it in the chat. So these were not super short. These were not micro learning videos. They were a little longer than that, but they weren't, half-hour videos. They were somewhere in that range. I think the Balana was around 6 or 8 minutes, and I think the Alum might have been 12 minutes. Yeah. Okay. So that's the rough difference. Now, when most of the data I'm going to show you, including the data you're seeing here, comes from when we brought them back. It turns out on the activity itself, there was no significant difference between the students who had the video or not in terms of scores TAs gave them. Now, TAs were using a very strict grading rubric. Did they address the theory? Did they address the hypothesis, et cetera, et cetera? So it was sort of, I guess you'd call it a coarse grain kind of look. And we didn't pick up anything there. But critically, when we brought them back 5 weeks later and asked them about the paper, now's where we're seeing the good retention effect, which is just a much deeper form of learning. So what I've done, they didn't really summarize the research, in most general terms is what I'd say. So they didn't get into the details. In fact, what came through the videos more, I think, or something to consider as we look at these results, is the scientist was humanized, right? You got to meet the scientist, you got a sense of why they did it, why they thought the research was important. And yes, you got the sort of mile-high description by the scientist of of what they did and what they found. But not all the scientists certainly didn't say the independent variable I manipulated was whatever, and here are the 3 dependent variables I measured. They talked about it in more lay terms, like you talk to somebody over a coffee about the research you did. So to speak. And I suspect we can make these videos available if there's a desire to see them when we follow up with the email. That would be perfectly cool. Okay, so what we've done, just so you see the results here. So first of all, I'm showing you the entire knowledge retention results. So we asked them 5 or 6 questions. This is everything combined together right now. And I've broken it down, first of all, by the 2 separate papers and videos that they just picked one of these. Some of them picked alum, some of them picked Bologna. These last pair of bars is just that data collapsed. And what you see is in both cases, we're seeing better retention of the paper if the students experience the video first. So basically, we're seeing a 14% increase in retention. And the biggest advantage was with respect to the sort of core concepts that were discussed within the video. And the video group, as is suggested here, still outperformed as well or better on non-video questions. So I'm going to show you this next. We broke out just those questions that asked things that were in the paper, but not in the video. So, the question is, are they just getting 2 hits and that's why they're remembering it better? Well, here's the next data where we, there we go. Okay, there we go. Where we're asking questions that really try to tap their understanding. So a sort of deeper level of Bloom's hierarchy for those of you who know Bloom's hierarchy. So we're not asking about little specific details that were mentioned. We're now asking them a few questions that they can only answer if they really understood what was going on. And what you see here is, in fact, the effect is most powerful for those ones. So yes, they're remembering the stuff that's in the video well, but when we really tap that deep understanding and stuff you could not have gotten just from the video alone, we're seeing, again, a good advantage of the video. So this is what's suggesting the video is acting as a scaffold. It's acting to help students penetrate the paper itself. That's the kind of idea here. So a very solid advantage observed with video access, 36% increase. Again, these are things not explicitly discussed. And it really, again, we're talking about this functional underlying relationship between variables. We're going to the deeper level of Bloom's hierarchy, and we're seeing that they're doing that they're coming through at that level. So that's kind of cool. That was our first approach. Now I want to mention this too, and I'm curious about maybe get a Sapo reaction on this one, but I'm not going to give you the full details on this because it would take a while to kind of break apart. But there's this survey called the Implicit Motivation Inventory, the IMI. It links to something called self-determination theory. And really what it gets at is how motivated students feel. And it breaks the motivation down into a few different categories. Some of the categories are with respect to how enjoyable students found the task and how personally valuable they found the task. And those indices were highly impacted by this video. When they saw the videos, they found the task more enjoyable and more valuable. And that's important because we know these things are correlated with a lot of other things, including just generally higher academic performance, less distraction, etc. And so this is great. And what this suggests is, the reason students are able to get more out of that paper is because they're actually enjoying the process a little bit more. They're doing it for the right reasons. This autonomous motivation is at play here. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious for a second, Sapo. What do you think about video and why this might? What do you think of these results? So why would it make it more motivational? Any thoughts from the student side of things?
Yep, of course. Thank you for the question. So like I said, it's so hard to penetrate some of these papers. And so the first clear thing, it lowers that barrier down. And if you just cannot understand it, so you don't get motivated at all. But
Right.
the second thing is Dr. Jordan's mentioned, there's that human aspect. And I can relate actually, I can reflect a bit more detail into that. So imagine modern students, we love technology, right? Like we like seeing videos, like seeing content creators and all that, but we do not expect anyone academia to actually come down to that level with us and um, actually like create a video about their own paper and for like an audience, a wider audience to understand. So as a student, I feel like the research are kind of keeping up with that generations of learners. Like we love video and like Instagram, TikTok, and I guess this can be on YouTube or whatever. So when they are making so much effort to make their complex and important research more accessible in whatever ways they can, like even just an overview, we admire and then I guess we respect them more. And we know that the researchers kind of care about their audience and about their work. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why it may increases our motivation to actually understand the, like read the research paper firsthand instead of like reading newspaper and all that stuff. Yeah, that's my short take on it.
Fantastic. No, that's a lot of great things that you've highlighted there, Sapo. And I like him saying we're coming into their world a little bit, the world in which they're sort of naturally motivated to do things. So I think that's very, very cool. There's a part two to this. I'm going to go through part two a little more quickly because again, we want a lot of time for the discussion, but I want to give you a sense because, some of the things Sapo said, you can kind of get to know the person, you can feel like they care. That kind of raises the question of, is it about the video itself? Is it about seeing that person and having that sort of interaction, or is it really just the information that's in the video? Or said another way, how critical is the medium of video itself? And so in our second experiment, it was very much like the first one, except now we randomly assigned people to 3 groups. One group saw the video, just as described before. These are different papers, so it's a different video. The next group, here's literally what happened. We created a transcript of that video. And so some people just got that transcript. And so they got to read that transcript with all the same information, just not delivered by the researcher. And then we had a voiceover, which was somebody else, somebody from our team reading the transcript. So again, same information, but it's now not the researcher's voice and it's not the researcher's image that you're seeing. We had 111 students this time, 298 who completed the follow-up, who came back the 5 months later. We had a number of other measures too that I'll mention to you as we go through. So let's just do a quick poll here. What do you think? Is there something especially powerful about video as a means to convey information? That's some of the things that Sapo was kind of suggesting there. Or do you think that it's just the information that really matters? And as long as that information is there in whatever form, students will find that useful and impactful. And just give you a little bit to answer this. And then we'll just move on from there. Yeah, and thank you for all the chat in the okay, so we noticed the alum's a little longer. That alum video was more like about 18 minutes. Cool. And please feel free to do exactly what you're doing right now to keep the conversation going and reacting back and forth. All right, here we go. So the winner is, I think that video is a much more powerful way to connect with the modern student. Yeah, okay, so I mean, that's really echoing sort of Sapo's thoughts, and that's what we wanted to see experimentally. Is that in fact true? All right, sorry. So here's the funny thing. The first data was beautifully clean. Everything that happened in one paper happened in the other. This data, we have 2 different papers. Again, the students had a choice of which paper they wanted to use, but we had those 3 variants for each case. And what you're going to see consistently is for the King paper, the video was really powerful. And we're seeing the effects of it. For the Wiggins, you're going to see it kind of come and go a little bit more. That makes all the conclusions a little trickier, but it also opens questions, right, about what's different about these 2. And so now that's some of the questions we're starting to think about, but we won't talk about that in detail today. But we'll just say that, hey, first of all, when you look at all the knowledge, what you are seeing is that for the King paper, at least, that the video does have an advantage over the other 2 mediums in terms of knowledge retention. Not seeing that in the Wiggins, but we're seeing that in the King. What if we, I'm tempted to look at Karen's thing here, but I'll just continue on for a second. What if we now pull out just those questions, again, just like we did in the first paper, that relate to things, relate to that deeper level of understanding, stuff they can't just get from having watched the video. Now we see, again, if you look at the right, for the King paper, we're seeing a very strong effect of video as a superior medium for presenting that information. And we're getting a hint of that with the Wiggins as well, not clearly as powerful as the King paper, but in the same direction and suggesting the same sort of advantage. So, yeah, so the grad student hired part, don't worry about that too much. We're doing a bunch of natural language processing on stuff. And so we actually are doing some labeling so we can analyze things at a deeper level. But for this talk, the critical thing is it does seem like there's something special about video, although it also seems like there's something in that King and Wiggins thing to kind of look at. The King video was a little shorter in length. That's true, for sure. But we think it's more than that too, but we're trying to tear that apart. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A. Yeah, you guys are getting at the right point. So I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna get through this because there's so many good things coming up. I don't want to short circuit some of that conversation. This stuff is interesting, and I just want to make sure we get a chance to talk about this as well. One of the other things we asked them, there's a questionnaire for how much people trust science. And what we found, this is going to be a bit of a three-step logic here, but what we found is that the people who did better on our retention quizzes, the ones who remembered the papers better, had higher level of trust in science. So they generally trusted science more. And now, here's the logic. If this supplement use, if the videos, for example, help them understand the paper better, then the videos may be actually helping enhance trust in science, which is part of the whole scientific literacy goal. It sort of is a good way of knowing, are you getting where you want to go? Because if they're getting it, they should be increasing in their trust of science. So it's, again, a 2 or 3 step logic that we're employing here, but this is kind of highlighting where this research is going to really nail down this sort of causal chain of how things are working. And you could say, okay, well, that trust in science, was that especially impacted by seeing the video per se, or did all of the supplements kind of have the same effect? And once again, we have the King and the Wiggins over here. If we pool overall, we see that most of the trust of science advantage came from that video condition. Although we're seeing a weird thing with the voiceover, where the people who heard the voiceover with King really didn't trust science. Those with Wiggins did. So that's sort of an odd bar when you break it down by the papers. This breakdown by the papers, is really, when we say worthy of further investigation, it's interesting to see that video seems to have some special mojo of some sort. But now we have to get into the specifics of the videos. Why do some videos work better than others? And so much more detailed. Both voiceovers were indeed recorded by the same person. Could reading comprehension be a factor? Always, but we're randomly assigning students to these groups, so there's no reason to expect that would explain the results. But it could explain why there's an impact. It could be helping students. The video could be helping students who may have a challenge of another sort there as well. Just like it helps with the general challenge. All right, 2:33. All right, I wanted to be done by 2:35. We're right on schedule. Yes, best practices. That's what exactly. Okay, so let me just kind of highlight these major findings. So what we're seeing is having these scientist videos, and Adam loves this idea, by the way, more generally. He loves the idea of scientists, almost like Sapo said, taking the time to present their research in a way the general public could understand. So this idea of maybe, encouraging publishers, for example, to encourage those who publish in their journals to create videos like this that might be more accessible for the average person. And this is an example of the impact those videos could have in a classroom, but they could have the same impact more widely. We're finding that they enhance both the motivation of the student and the depth to which they learn. It seems as though videos are superior to other ways of presenting that same information, although we really have to get at why exactly, what makes for the most powerful video. And, the cool thing is we are seeing this impact on the trust of science, which gets back to that scientific literacy that, you know, if they really understand it, then they should. I mean, if you get scientific literacy, then you should leave that process by believing that scientific facts are more accurate than ones that don't have a scientific basis behind them. All righty. So with that, so this was again a specific study looking at, you know, a specific use case, but now I'm going to turn it over to my friend David here, who's going to translate this all into the library world and get us all thinking along so we can start asking some good questions. So I will turn it over to you, my friend.
Hey everybody, like was said before, I am David Kwasny. I'm the Digital Projects and Technologies Librarian at the UTSC Library. And I'm gonna kind of bring this back as was suggested by Steve and say, how would supplemental academic video content affect libraries? My first poll, this is an open-ended poll, and I'd like you to use the chat, is how could additional media content packaged with primary source papers affect libraries? Money. Totally. That's an idea that I didn't bring up in mind. Yeah. Yeah, the addition of institutional repositories. So yeah, within your own institution, add those. Portable courses, copyright questions, terms and licensing. Oof. Library loan deliberately becomes an issue. True. There's efficiency in institutions. Yeah, these are all great answers. So a few things that I thought about. The first one is cataloging. So something that I found really striking in Steve's research was the use of supplemental content created by the author of the primary source content. And while I'm not a systems librarian, I imagine new content like this could cause for new search protocols. I do work with special collections cataloging, and I can tell that based on our Ferber conceptual entity relationships model, these new methods of delivery would be considered an expression of the original work and would need to allow for some level of relationship within our searchability. Also, would there be new facets we could add for users to prioritize these articles that have the supplemental content with them? Just something to consider. Another aspect that I thought of was less content creation and resourcing for us, which I love because often we're asked to create resource lists, provide information, or even instruct on various topics. Having this content already developed would save us quite a bit of time. I find myself often making my own video content because providing asynchronous content saves me a lot of time, but having this content already available in various media formats saves me even more time. I'm not sure about you, but I know a lot of liaison librarians that would love this. So that's how I think that it would affect us as librarians, but what about our users? How would additional media content packaged with primary source papers affect our users? In the chat, sorry. More inclusive in meetings, learning styles, and users. Yeah. Good question for Sapo to answer. Oh, okay. Sapo,
Sure.
how would you find this?
Okay, so in my opinion, like I read some comments saying that should it replace reading papers in general. So I would love to see at least like the main papers in the field to have like the media content. Like I believe like right now if I search at U of T libraries, there's a PDF, so that's much easier. But a video, I know it's a hard thing for researchers to do for every of their papers, but at least like for the main papers, or at least for our course or for the beginning of, you know, our academic journey, it would be nice if the instructor can collaborate with the librarian and get those like main papers for us to practice reading papers in general. That's just my thoughts.
Good take. I think that you're on board with a lot of the comments that are happening right now. The one that I think is really interesting is that some students would confuse it for the paper's content. So that would kind of be the opposite of the information literacy that we're kind of getting into. Interesting take. Would need reliable internet access, true. Potential for confusion. What parts are important? All of it. Diversity, yeah. Easier to understand, increasing attention and information, yep. Applicable research topics. Books often come with websites to view that content, additional content. I don't see how this is different. Sure. Yeah, these are all really great answers. And I think that it kind of comes, I think we're all on the same boat, that it kind of comes down to access. So as librarians, we're the disseminators of information, which is a common theme within our prime directive, literacy. I saw that one of the comments within the beginning of this presentation was, in the field of librarianship, we're in disinformation. So literacies are significant to us, which is like exactly my point. Yes, Roxana. If providing new methods of information discovery assist knowledge retention as well as subject literacy, we are obviously on board, right? Right. And let's not forget, when we're saying access, it's an extension. By extension, we are also saying accessibility. So I saw that a lot in the chat. I feel like this is probably one of the most noteworthy aspects of supplemental content development and inclusion. So let's help people learn, right? And UTSC Library, if you'd like to get a hold of us, these are our social medias, our different institutions here within our library.
David, did that previous slide really say take a shelfie? Did that really?
Yes, yes, it did.
A shelfie, that is clever. I like that.
Librarians love puns, right, group?
I haven't seen one pun in the chat yet. Come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David, and Steve and Sapo. But let's go to the questions. We've got a few, and some have been answered, and there are actually some really good questions in the chat as well. So I'll just go from, so we have one at the top first of all, a couple from Susanna Gal. So one is, do you have a pre-video test of whether they trusted science more even without the video, which I thought was really interesting question. So Steve, I don't know whether or not you would be able to address that one.
So great idea. We did not. So yeah, it would be really nice to have a pre-post, and then you could really look at the impact that that had on their trust in science. And in fact, you know, you're making me want to do that pre-post course now. I almost feel like it's what I want to do in the first day of my course and then the last day of my course, and see how much of an impact the course had. So that's cool. All we really had was that one measure. So that's, you know, why we could show that those who did better on the quiz had a higher score on that. But what doesn't allow us to actually see the amount of impact that the learning experience had. And I think that would be a fascinating thing. So I think that's a fantastic question, Susanna. I'll put it on my list, my to-do list.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so next question is actually maybe one more for our choice colleagues. Will the chat part of what is of what we've had be shared? There are loads and loads of great ideas, and actually I think it would be wonderful if there was a way in which we could have the chat commentary. I certainly would be really interested in having it. So I don't know, Sabrina, is that the case? Will we be able to have that?
We will have a copy of the chat. I think it's more if everyone's comfortable sharing it with all the if all the registrants and attendees who attended are comfortable sharing their answers, because we don't want anyone to feel, I don't know, like they're forced to put their comments publicly, but we will have a transcript, so yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to get consent from everyone in this room, although there are a lot of thumbs ups coming through the chat. So, okay. Susanna Gall asked another question. I'd be interested in how this might support students with different preparation levels. This is a really good point. Do these make less prepared students do better? Or could we compare the grades before, without the videos versus after with? So that's really interesting, Stephen. I don't know whether or not in terms of, I don't know how you assess less prepared in the context of one of these online experiments, but is there any sort of thing you can is there any nuance to this that you can pull out from that around either of the phases of the study?
So that is sort of the holy grail. Whenever we're trying to scaffold a learning experience, what we hope is that the benefit will go to the students who would benefit from it most. And so often, when we have things like writing centers or something, the students that go to the writing centers are the students that are getting B pluses that want A's. We want is the students that are getting D's, and we want to get them up to C's or B's. And so that's a really important question to ask. Who is this benefiting? And there are ways of, I can look at their performance on other things in the course and kind of get at that. So Adam right now is in a deep dive of really trying to see how he can analyze the data in detail for a lot of these things. And that's the kind of question we could answer. Unlike your other one where we just didn't do that pre-test, so that ship has sailed. But in this one, we could certainly look at a lot more detail of this and try to get a sense of which students are most affected. Our hope would be that we would really be getting at the zone of proximal development. I don't know if you guys know the Vygotskian concept of the zone of proximal development, but the idea there is, and then Sapo kind of said it well himself, if the terminology is so complex and confusing that we try to read, or they try to read the paper, but very early on they're finding it just hard to penetrate, they may reach the opinion that it's too hard for them. They can't get there. And so it's outside their zone, and that demotivates them. If by giving them a little bit of a head start, a little bit more comfort with some of the terminology and the humanity of the person behind it, if that helps them kind of get enough into it to start feeling more competent, then that could be the key change in motivation. So my theory would be exactly as you suggested, that it's helping those students who might not be as prepared, that those are the ones getting the maximum benefit. That's what we'd also love to see, but we're gonna have to do some more analyses to get you the right answer to that. But fantastic again. Actually, Sage has sponsored this research, and it just looks like we have a lot more work to do, Michael.
Yes, it does. Yes. Well, we'd be very happy to help. I mean, we're sort of very interested in learning much more about the pedagogy of video and learning. And actually, that's sort of related to a question that Lisa Hooper has put in to the Q&A. This is obviously a fab plug for the Sage videos. I might add that, of course, and Steve, you can clarify, it was not just Sage videos that were part of this study. There were non-Sage videos as part of this, for so that we don't have that conflict of interest in bias. But anyway, those are behind a big paywall, and as many video providers content is. What are the chances of creators having the opportunity to opt in to making their video open access, so students at less financially privileged institutions and the broader public can access their research? That's a really, really good question. I might just quickly have a crack at answering that first of all. We have been at Sage, we've been exploring opportunities for how we can potentially partner with institutions in some white labeling capacity, potentially to allow institutions to import or create their own videos, to potentially import videos into our platform with our features potentially, or something that we've all customizable at the institution's end. We have not. That's an enormously complex technical kind of enterprise, and we have other things that we've been developing more recently. But it is something we continue to examine and research, and when we have more to say on that, we will definitely come out. We have heard this many times, actually, as a potential interest area. So that's really good. That's a really good point and really good question. And Steve, I don't know if you...
Yeah, just jump on in a couple things. So first of all, somebody, Lael, asked for the contact information for Adam, and I know Adam would be happy to share. So I just threw it in the chat, adam.frost@utoronto.ca. And Adam's dream, we'll see if maybe Sage could be the first person we convince, or the first publisher we convince. But Adam's dream would be literally that when a scientist submits their paper to a SAGE publication, a SAGE journal, and that paper is accepted, that they are at least potentially encouraged and maybe in some way supported to create a short video. And that video could be used in an educational context like it is in this case. But Adam's, again, bigger dream is, it's the general public should have access to scientific findings, and the general public doesn't find journal articles particularly easy to penetrate. But maybe if these other videos were available in some open way, then maybe it could be a resource for the general public as well. So certainly Adam is thinking in those sorts of grandiose levels, and we would love to be partnering with publishers and seeing if they would be willing to come on board with that sort of thing. And Michael would be our first target, obviously.
Oh, we'd be very happy to help and support that. Yes. And the next question down on the list is by Lael. I won't pronounce the surname because I'm worried I might get it wrong. But the question is: are there contact information of the scientist who was described in the video? Yes. We have, haven't we, Steve? So we have the details of the academics who were very much the contributors to those videos that were in the studies.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that a little quickly. Like Adam, you can certainly contact Adam and ask him for any of these details, and he'll happily share. And let me also just say in general that, there's the notion that Adam really had in mind, which is these videos as a bridge. But in some cases, we wanted to do videos and we wanted to use some of the SAGE videos as well. And in the second experiment, Adam didn't have one of the videos. He pre-creates some videos for these with a very specific sort of way of doing it, and that's why we're seeing variability across these videos. Like in some cases, the video that was created for SAGE wasn't really created exactly with the same thought in mind of being a bridge to an article, but it was by that researcher and it was in that area, and so we used it. But it would be interesting to see, if we've already had this discussion, what are the qualities that really make a video impactful in this kind of context, in a scientific literacy context, and then kind of nail that down a little bit and see, if those were what the videos were, would we see even more of a learning impact through them?
Yeah. Some wonderful questions here. Lael also put another question forward. Are there mini Q&As after the video is streamed? So just from I'll make an answer from the SAGE side. On the SAGE videos that we used were what we call case study videos, which typically on the SAGE Research Methods platform put a spotlight on an area of research or research publication. And very often at the end of those videos, we have, they're not interactive Q&A per se, but there are questions that are put forward around the research for students to, in a self-directed way, go and answer. That isn't on all of those videos, but it's a sort of standard form on most of our case study videos. But I'm not sure about the non-SAGE videos, actually.
Yeah, so they were just videos at this point, but there's certainly that, I always get the term wrong, 5H5P or 5HP or something like that. So that technology, was it 5HP or H5P?
H5P.
Yeah. So that technology is certainly on our minds a little bit more now, and I don't see any reason not to use it. It's always good just to, have the viewer kind of reflect on the fact. It also gives you a little bit of data that suggests they got to the end, if you have the video at the end. So it's trivial to do now with the 5HP technology that's out there, H5P technology, whatever. And I think that would be a good idea. So I think if we were going to use these going forward, we would do exactly that.
Wonderful. Okay. Let's see if there are any other questions in the chat that we might have missed. And do keep coming. We have just a few more minutes. If you have more questions, do please post them.
Yeah, there's an interesting thought there, Michael, from Hannah. Linking these videos to the researcher's ORCID may be interesting. So yeah, I assume everyone knows what those things are. Suggesting a collaboration for you there.
Yeah. Well, let me just plant a question back to both of you, and if others who are still with us want to chip in with their thoughts or comments. I mean, this was a pretty profound study over the course of many months in 2 phases. When you think about it, both Steve from an educator's perspective and David from a librarian's perspective, what do you think is the most sort of what do you think is the most profound thing that you take away from this, that you want to reflect on a little bit more, both as an educator and then as a librarian?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just very, very quickly go first. This is my head. I taught a history of psychology class, and I taught about Vygotsky, and I was thinking about the zone of proximal development and all that, and that really got me back to scaffolding. I keep throwing students into things, and I realized at some point I'm sometimes throwing them over their head. I'm asking them to do teamwork without properly preparing them for how to do teamwork. I'm asking them to penetrate scientific articles when they're not really ready to do it. And I've become someone who thinks scaffolding is really, really important for the reasons we've discussed, that it really helps those students who aren't quite ready to get there and to succeed and to have a positive learning experience. And so I think this is just another example, a very specific example in the scientific literacy area of the power of scaffolding. And I think that's something that librarians play a critical role in helping faculty help their students through the supplements we provide and the services, like I know you help them with writing and all sorts of things. And so that scaffolding is a really, really important role. So I'd like to thank you all for that. It's something I feel is more critical all the time. David.
Yeah, I love scaffolding, and I agree with your point there. What I will walk away from this with is some of the comments. So I believe that this will improve information literacy and literacy in general. However, some of the comments talked about student confusion. This individual comment says, student confusion that students might choose video/primary source, not necessarily understanding the mode of academic conversation. That's very interesting to me, and it's something that it will haunt my dreams. No, I'm just kidding. I just think it's something to consider, and it's something I hadn't considered prior, so I will think about that. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Sapo. I think we're almost at time. A conversation that there's been some planning, and it's really wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to have live with you all, wherever you may be. So I want to thank you for your contributions, Steve and Sapo. Wonderful kind of educator's perspective and sort of student learning perspective. And David for really surfacing some really interesting points and themes, which I think provoked a raft of comments in the chat from the fellow librarians who have been attending today. So thanks very much for your time. With that, Sabrina, I'll hand back to you to offer a close to our webinar today.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. And thank you to Steve, Sapo, and David for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you to Michael for moderating the discussion and the Q&A. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and comments. It was a really informative and valuable discussion. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording. And we'll also work on making the chat available to everyone as well. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we'd really appreciate it. Your responses help improve our presentations. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the session, and we hope to see you again in the near future on another webinar.